thanks for having me today. I appreciate you inviting me to the studio.
Yeah, what do you think?
It's great. It's great. Definitely has some unique charm to it here.
Yeah, little character.
Yeah.
As I was explaining to Patty earlier, there's like about 18 years of history in this place. So it's always fun to come back in here and just, like I said, I love the quality of the audio and video here, but then you've got all this kind of historical stuff and all the DEF CON badges hanging on the wall.
Yeah,
So it's
very cool. And I think you have about 18,000 cigars have been smoked in here as well.
A lot.
Yeah.
One of the podcasts was Stogie Geeks.
Yeah.
Paul still owns it, and that humidor used to be filled with cigars, but not as many these days.
Well, you have the cigar shop next door.
Yeah, right next door.
Yeah. So it makes it easy.
Yeah, it makes it real easy.
Well, again, we're so excited that you're joining CyberSaint. It's a great time for you to be joining the leadership team. We're definitely at an inflection point as a company. Our growth path has been going up to the right, and this market has been taken off. So we're super excited to have you and wanted to welcome you. So it's great to be able to do this. Being recorded and filmed doing it. So
thank you.
Yeah.
we'll check this video in a couple years.
We'll see if I'm still happy. Well, again, welcome to CyberSaint and cyber risk management. We've been hearing about it this year. It's been a huge buzzword in cybersecurity. I'd love to get your take on the market, where it is now, where is it going, and really, just to get your opinion as we finish up 2023.
Yeah, when I see the opportunity, right, risk management is something we've been talking about on the podcast for a long time. I started in this industry around 2003. Mm-hmm. I went to run the third-party vendor risk management program for one of the large national banks in Cleveland, and that's kind of what got me into this risk management space. And I think about what's happened over the last 20 years. Here's what's happened. We've done a pretty good job of moving from spreadsheets to more automation and software. But when we started in the early days, we made some really interesting assumptions. We thought, well, wait a minute. It's all about the controls. So I need to think about, how do I assess controls? And so if you look at all the early GRC players in this space, right, we all started with this concept of using questionnaires to assess control status to identify where potential risks were, primarily residual risk at the time, right? And the decision we made was actually pretty limiting to the kind of the historic technologies. Because questionnaires were great for management and operational controls, but they didn't really scale well to technical controls. But it was a decision we all made. The market's evolved pretty dramatically beyond a need just to capture management and operational controls and well beyond questionnaire workflows and all this other stuff, to the point where risk is starting to take a much more kind of focused area. When we think about the SEC requirements that came out earlier this year and some of the talk that was leading up to that, it's almost like the Sarbanes-Oxley moment. Because I remember Sarbanes-Oxley. I was actually doing consulting work when Sarbanes-Oxley came out, and it was a way for organizations to really get their arms around financial reporting, financial risk. We're there finally with cyber. It took us over 20 years to get here. But now we're starting to realize that we have to get our arms around cyber risks, which means we need a cyber risk management solution. And if you look at the existing technologies, they weren't built as cyber risk management platforms. They were built as governance and compliance platforms. And we know that those don't always equate. And so where I see the opportunity in the market moving is, who are going to be the vendors, the technologies, the thought leaders that are going to take a risk-first approach into this market and then use that to make decisions off of. That's what I think the opportunity finally is. And now that the CEO and the CISO have to start reporting around cyber risks, I think there's a really interesting opportunity for technologies like CyberSaint, which is why I'm here, to really start to help organizations get their arms around the cyber risk challenge.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's what excites me, right? We see the cyber risk approach with digital transformation coming together, right? And we've been waiting for this for a lot of years, right? Digital transformation. When I first came over, I saw this market as being, this is absolutely ripe for digital transformation, digital disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where our focus has been. And I'm glad that you saw that through the interview process and as you evaluated us as a company and as a product as we move forward. So
I loved, so Patty, I've interviewed him a number of times on the podcast over the years, and I've always loved what he was doing. Like we kind of like do this kind of mind meld kind of thing, right? It's like, oh my gosh, you guys started with automating control areas. I mean, you have the risk components too, but in the early days, it was all around some of this control automation. I was like, wait a minute, I wish I could do control automation. When I went to Archer in 2012, right, one of the challenges was that architecture could not scale to take real-time controls into the platform.
Right.
Because it was built for questionnaires. It wasn't built to do. And so I actually ended up hiring a buddy of mine from Qualys to come over and build like this middleware that would take in vulnerability data, analyze the vulnerability data because Archer couldn't do it directly, and then just take the results of that and put it into Archer so you could remediate. You guys built that as one solution. I didn't need a middleware piece to think about how could I ingest hundreds to thousands of controls into a platform to look at where current control state would drive risk, right? I think the other thing that is really interesting about what you guys have done is the advising data and bringing in the actuarial data.
Right.
We're not any different than the financial or the insurer risk models at the end of the day. Everybody thought cyber was so unique. It's actually not.
Right.
If you can do the same things that the insurers do in pricing policies because they understand where the risks are and what the cost to them downstream is using actuarial data, applying that to cyber has a huge benefit to it. But no one's ever thought that it was even possible until Patty started going down this path, right? And when you bring those two capabilities together in a unified platform, it's a game changer,
right.
Jerry. That's what I think is so interesting about where you guys are in the journey right now.
Yeah. And that's what, what I loved about the company when I first started is we built on the front end, the frameworks. It could be customized or standardized,
Mm-hmm.
right? Being able to upload and take any framework and controls into the platform. And then on the back end, not having a proprietary risk model, being able to insert any risk model in. So having an engine that can do both sides of that is, I think, puts us at a huge advantage in this market.
It does, and it's pretty much out of the box. Your crosswalking capabilities is pretty fascinating because I remember doing them by hand.
Yep. Yeah.
I remember doing them by hand.
Yeah.
They're not fun.
Yeah.
In one of the segments we just did, there's like over 35 international frameworks, right? Can you imagine doing all that by hand? Like, that was just a killer, right?
Yeah.
But then you tie that into risk and allow flexibility of the risk model, because this is the other interesting thing. No two organizations are going to have the same risk model. Even if they use FAIR, for example, which you guys support out of the box, they're going to customize it.
Right.
They're going to have a customized FAIR.
Yep.
And so the ability to bring your own risk model or customize existing risk models, I think has a huge advantage, because the other challenge when I was at Archer, for example, was a lot of our revenue is generated from professional services.
Right.
Everything we built was a professional services engagement. Well, it does two things. One, it slows down implementation because now you have a bunch of professional services work that has to be done. And look, I think there is some level of customization that professional services it requires, but not 50% of your business. Right. The second thing is it limits your upgrade capabilities, your upgrade paths. I had a really good friend of mine who did a lot of work on deploying these systems, and he would touch platforms like RSAM and Metric Stream and all those guys. Anytime you started to customize, you started to break your upgrade paths.
Right.
So how do you build a platform that allows you to customize, but also allows you to get the latest and greatest capabilities? All the early players struggled with this, Jerry. And you guys have built some interesting architectures that allow you not to have to do that, which means your clients can customize, but then they can also get the latest and greatest features because they're not locked into a version because they customized it so much.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had some of our customers, some of the largest enterprises who have GRC products, and they say they've been built and snowflaked so much that it takes 6 months to have a security patch deployed. and they did not want to do that when they were looking at a cyber risk management solution. So that's been a huge value that we bring to the market as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the quantification side of this, I think, is really what's going to drive this whole market. The ability to quantify things in terms that CEOs and boards and others can get their heads around, which to me is it's always about dollars and cents.
Right.
If you can show the ability to mitigate a risk or even open up an opportunity that's tied to revenue, it allows the chief risk officer, the chief information security officer, whoever owns that budget, to be able to start to justify investment spend to mitigate or expand. And again, I think this is a really interesting way to think about it, is we've been thinking about risk scores and inherent versus residual risk and all these things over the years. And really, at the end of the day, I think it's just dollars and cents. Like anybody who can effectively quantify this as dollars and cents wins at the end of the day.
Well, you're putting in business terms, which, right, the CEO, the CFO, they want to be able to understand in business terms and as you said, not in risk numbers, right?
Right.
You know, so
the board's the same way, though, Jerry.
Yeah.
I mean, they think in financial terms.
Right.
They're there as a fiduciary, right, for the business, and that usually boils down to dollars and cents. And so one of the things that SEC regulations didn't do, which is actually okay for us, I think, is not requiring cyber expertise on the board. And I think the reason they were thinking that is because somebody had to interpret all these risk scores and all these events and threats and stuff. But if you put it into their terms at the board level in dollars and cents, you don't necessarily need that cyber expert sitting on the board because now they understand it, because now it boils down to dollars and cents.
Right, right. As opposed to saying you're a 3 and, you know,
Correct.
a 3 on a 1 to 5.
Right. I'm a 3.5 out of 5.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
Is that good, bad? I don't know. What's your risk ranges? Like, but when I can say it's 172 million or 2 million, they understand that. Oh, I'm going to spend 2 million to offset potentially 172 million dollars in risk. Yeah, I can fund that.
Yeah.
They understand that.
Yeah.
Right. So what do I need cyber expertise for on the board if I can do it that way?
Right. Right. Yeah, so I agree 100%. And that's, you know, one of the reasons why you're such a great fit coming in and leading our product as we move forward. I could talk all day about that. I do want to talk a little bit about your experience, because you've had such a vast experience. You've had some large enterprises, you've had some startups, you've sold some companies on your own. What really drove you to coming back to a startup?
I love the startup community. I have for a long time. It's interesting is when I started my first company, Control Path, which is what we ended up calling it. It was a product we built under the Accuvant umbrella. And when we got ready to spin it out, they asked me, like, are you going to be the CEO? And I said, no, I'm not ready to be a CEO. This is 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago now. I knew the technology, I knew the requirements, I knew what needed to be built. And so I took the chief technology officer role as a founder. When I sold that business, I learned a lot through that kind of path, right? I hired a CEO, I hired the wrong CEO, and then I got a really great opportunity to go work at some kind of not super early stage vendors, but ones that went through a lot of maturity. So I went to Qualys. Philippe taught me things I would never have thought about in the cloud, right? Qualys being one of those first cloud players. He taught me scale. Scale at a level that no one was dealing with in 2009, right? And I also learned about product management, product marketing, and subject matter expertise, because we were all three in that role. And certain aspects of that role I was better at than others, right? And then when I went to Archer, and taking my product management background and product marketing background and really aligning how we were going to take Archer to market under the RSA umbrella and the things we needed to do to kind of repackage that platform in a way that it was platform and solutions, right? Great learning experience. I competed with them for 5 years. Then going over to Tenable to run strategy, right? I mean, all very interesting parts of my career, but never to the point where I was ready to go back into a CEO role. So when I left Tenable, in 2017, I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do next.
Right.
But what I did know is I love to help startups. And so I was just doing advisory consulting. And I happened to run across a company, one of my advisory clients, that was doing something that I had recommended to Tenable on the container security side. And the founders are like, "Oh, you got to come work for us." And I'm like, "Oh, I'll consult for you." And eventually they said, no, you got to do this, right? Like run marketing and strategy. Now think about that for a second. Strategy and marketing, like that's an interesting combination. But it was about aligning the strategy of where you were taking the business to how you wanted to message that in the market. And we were one of the first ones to build out this category called container native application protection. It's a term now used by Gartner, but we coined it back in 2017, 2018. And I just love that. And when we sold Layered Insight, I had a really interesting kind of career path change for me. I could have gone back into a product role for a single company, also a startup that eventually got bought by Cisco, which would have been another interesting exit. Or my alternative was to come here to Security Weekly and be the CEO, a role I had not done. And I looked at it for two reasons. One, I had learned enough of the business side, having gone through all this other work on the product and strategy and marketing side, where I'm like, okay, that's a role I haven't done. I want to do it. But number two, it was the opportunity to help lots of startups. This Security Weekly podcast was a way for startups to come in and tell their story. And I always equated every sponsor that came on, I said, it's all about problem, solution, value. If you can articulate the challenge organizations have and how you solve it in a unique or differentiated way and the value that it drives to them, you will put yourself in a position to be heard and understood in the marketplace. And Paul and I did that for years, using this podcast network to do it. A lot of the sponsors are now, they've almost all required.
Yeah.
Like all these startups, like we were helping them refine their message and get their message into the market. It's just awesome. The mistake, I don't know if it's a mistake. Some people will look at this and go, when we sold it to Cyber Risk Alliance, we lost the pure culture of what Security Weekly was, and got included into a bigger media company, which, we thought was an opportunity, but you also lost part of that edge. And eventually I had to go back to build something, because in the media space, a lot of stuff is already there, right? Digital advertising's been around forever, and account-based marketing programs. There was no way for me to innovate there. And I got the itch to build something again, right. Jerry.
Yeah.
I'm an engineer by trade, and so I like to build. And so I wanted to get back out and build, and not just kind of manage a media company. So that's why I ended up leaving and going to Living Security and eventually here. It's the build part, but it's building at startups, right? Recruiters would call me. I had a buddy contact me. He's at Cisco now, one of the companies that wanted to hire me after I left Layered Insight. He goes, "Hey, by the way, you want to come over and run product for us under Cisco?" I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
You know why? Because I don't want a behemoth team. I don't want to manage dozens of people. It just slows you down, right? What I love about where you guys are is it's very small, tight knit, and here's where I can make a dent, right? I can really help an organization at this size. As they get bigger, it gets harder and harder to be effective in those environments. And so I just love the startup community. I don't think I'll ever go into a big organization ever again because it's not fun for me.
Yeah. But what I loved about your background, though, is you had such a diverse piece of it, right? You had the processes and procedures that the big companies teach you and building product and the life cycle of a product. But you also had, the ability to be able to move quickly and, make decisions and, work like a startup. So that's what really attracted me, in trying to get you on our team.
I built a few business plans in my career.
And as you know, in a startup, sometimes you have to rip it up pretty quickly.
You do. It's constantly looking at where the business is, where are the opportunities, how do you make the investments to accelerate on certain parts of the roadmap. Like, I don't remember who said it. And somebody said, I look at your career and I see you as one of two things, either a business-led product leader or a product-led business leader.
Yeah.
Because I've always associated the two kind of together, Jerry, in that product drives business, business helps fuel the product. Like, you have to understand both sides of that coin or you can't be effective in this space, especially at a startup that's very fast and nimble.
Yeah, yeah. And you have to have that desire to, and you've mentioned it before, and when I've talked to you, is this unfinished business feeling in your stomach, right? That you want one more.
I do. And the risk management space is one I never finished. Yeah. Like, this is my first startup. When Control Path actually patented an algorithm that my chief architect and I wrote around calculating residual risk. So there's a patent out there that he and I authored years ago on how to assess the risk in a business. It was the wrong approach. It was an interesting way to calculate risk, but as I think about it, and I've talked to Doug Hubbard and Richard Cyerson, who wrote the book on how to measure anything in cybersecurity, and Richard was a neighbor of mine when I was at Qualys. Like, I learned all this stuff, and I'm like, if I ever go back and build my own product again, it would be in the risk management space because I didn't finish what I started. I didn't have to start that business because you guys are already doing it. So it's a heck of a lot easier to actually come help you guys do this than probably going out and trying to fundraise on my own, especially in this economy. But it is an area of my career that I felt I didn't get to finish. And so, you know, this risk management space is kind of near and dear to my heart because it was my first product idea. Yeah. Right. And so, yeah, I there's a lot here for me to kind of like take this thing to the next level and kind of finish what I started. It'll take me over 20 years to finally get there. But I think the cool thing is that the vision was already here and it matched your vision, which you don't get too often. Right? No, that's why I said the mind meld that Patty and I have done, even in our interviews, but as we were starting to have the conversations about me coming over, we're just so in sync, Jerry. Like, he and I think a lot alike. And I think that's great to have a founder, because it's hard sometimes, right, to bring in somebody from the outside when you're the founder to kind of take over your baby a little bit, which I am with the product. But we see so much eye to eye that I think it will be somewhat easy transition, because I can bring all the expertise of all these other products I've built with a very similar vision to what Patty already has been working on and building. So it's just a really good fit. Yeah. And you kind of underscored it a little bit, saying, you know, bringing in somebody from the outside, right? That's a huge thing. And, I know. And you made my job really easy in doing that. So I thank you for that. Oh, you're welcome.
Or at least on this day. We'll look back 2 years from now.
Yeah, we'll go back a couple years and look at this and go, how'd that pan out? But
I was a genius.
Let's hope so for both of our sakes.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it, and I look forward to our time working really closely together as we kick this off. So, again, welcome to the CyberSaint team, and I'm really happy to have you as one of our leaders.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
All right.